dilated. Yeah. Worldwide. Gracie Veterano, old family first fam. Taught the world to swing that double-edged sword.
Welcome to the fourth episode of the MMA Podcast. Today we're planning on having UFC flyweight Ian Uncle Creepy McCall on. Definitely give us a call, tweet at us. We're also planning on breaking down last weekend's cards. UFC on FX, UFC 147, shit news to talk about. Rashad thinking about going to middleweight, PJ challenging Roy to a drug test. Aoki and Bibiano both signed with the up-and-coming ONE FC. Like I said, make sure you listen in about an hour. We plan on having Uncle Creepy on. Let's do it.
Go! We did it, mama. We did it. We did it for the love of the game. We did it, mama. We did it. I did it for. Yes, we did it, mama. We did it. This game will never be the same. We did it, mama. We did it. I did it for.
And welcome to the fourth episode of the MMA Podcast. I'm Jake. I'm here with Chris. How you doing today, man?
The world is our oyster, my friend. The world is our oyster.
What does that even mean?
It means that we can do whatever we want, and I love this podcast. And I love you, world. That
is very true. I love you, world. I love you, Lamp. And this is our own podcast. We're not run by anyone else. So we literally can do whatever the fuck we want. Big thanks, like I said earlier, to Ian, Uncle Creepy McCall. I mean, honestly, one of our favorite fighters. And when I shared with Chris earlier this week that we were going to have Ian McCall on, I think you may have sustained a minor heart attack.
I think I had an aneurysm, but either way, the excitement was flowing through my veins, and what an honor it is to have such a fun and funny guy, and he's really prolific in the world of MMA, so nothing to hate.
Yeah, I've had a great week as well. Hey, a little issue, just yesterday when I pulled my car into my driveway, I realized my driver's door wouldn't open on the inside, so since then I've had to crawl through my car and get out of the passenger seat, which is mainly just a bummer because I know I'm probably going to have to spend about $300 or $400 to have some dealer electrician do 10 minutes of work to fix it, but life could be a lot worse.
Here's a question.
It's a first world problem.
Yeah, here's a question. Now, when you're getting in the car, do you go face first and slide in like a little kid, or do you do the NASCAR and hop in from the side?
Oh, it's a small car, so, if it was like a expedition, I would probably need to crawl in like a 5-year-old, but it's a small Chevy Cobalt. So I try and NASCAR it up as much as I can. But it makes me think how those guys do it so agile-like. I mean, it looks like they could run up and just literally jump and slide in the car. I definitely do it that style, but I don't want to make it sound like I do it nearly as graceful as them. I look extremely, extremely awkward trying to get one leg in the door, and then I kind of hang and contort my body out, and people are wondering if I'm trying to break in or if I'm having some sort of a seizure or just exactly what's going on.
You're providing some comedy to some people with some probably boring lives, and you're saying, how do they do it? Well, simple answer, the guy who wrote the Book of Five Rings, practice 10 moves 1,000 times, and you will be good. Practice one move 10,000 times, and you will be a master.
He also had a really shitty car. I think he drove a Mitsubishi Galant.
Pretty sure he drove a Mustang.
My first car was a Mitsubishi Mirage, and I thank God every day that I still don't drive that, because it is tough driving a car with no AC, no power steering. Power steering is the worst because every time you make a turn, you got to make sure you're ready to just power it through the entire turn.
I don't know. I think having a car without power steering is kind of like you miss power steering when you have a car that doesn't have it. I mean, a lot of people with, old school cars live by it, but the average person would probably miss it if they didn't have it.
It's a good core workout, really. You really got to muscle it left and right. You're using a lot of obliques, triceps. It's a very good core workout. I would just drive around my block for about 30 or 40 minutes instead of going to the gym. It was perfect.
Joe Rogan does kettlebells like a man, and you drive an old school car.
I drive a car. Definitely make sure to check out our partners, MMA Mental. Robbie and Jay are both awesome guys, both over in UK, so they always have a different perspective to look at things from. Put in your picks for cards on the MMA Playground. Try and do better than me, which is a very, very likely occurrence. And definitely, too, if you'd like to call into the show, our number is 646-378-1046. We're going to try and get more listeners to call into the show as the show progresses. Our first 3 episodes kind of just wanted to get our feet in the water, but this is our 4th episode. You know, we're starting to get more and more experience, you know, and figuring out what we can do with our time better. So call in 646-378-1046 and let us know what's up, or tweet us at the MMA Podcast. We'll definitely try and respond to those tweets as much as you can. If you have a question, we'll try and slip that in for Ian McCall a little bit later. And visit the website, themmapodcast.com. Actually, don't currently have a live link on there now, but I'll make sure to get one on there when the show ends. If you do want a live link, though, check out our Twitter at the MMA Podcast and check that out. So without further ado, let's get into both of these cards. This is the first weekend I actually can remember that the UFC hosted 2 cards in the same weekend, back-to-back. Friday night was UFC on FX4, Gray Maynard versus Clay Guida, which was definitely a controversial fight. And then we had UFC 147 over in Brazil, which also was a little controversial. Not nearly as, but definitely had people talking.
Yeah, I've been watching the sport religiously for the last 4.5 years, and I can't remember this happening before, because if it did happen before, I would have remembered it and going, oh yeah, I remember back when such and such an event took place, followed by this event. I can't recall that, so I really don't think this has happened before, man.
Yeah, I think there may have been a week or two where there was an event on like a Tuesday or Wednesday, and then they also had an event that weekend. But having events back-to-back days, definitely really, really fun as an MMA fan.
Yeah, you know what? It was good having it, but alas, what a stinker they were.
Yeah, out of the 8 main event fights, there were 4 on each. 6 of the 8 went to decision. Both of the, well, I would say Pearson Swanson was definitely probably the card of all those main event fights. Pearson looked impressive in the beginning, showing off his strength, and I guess we should start there. Pearson was really looked like the better fighter first round. I gave Pearson the first round 10-9, showing off his strength, his wrestling. But Cub Swanson, Jesus Christ, I keep hating on that guy. Every fight I pick him to lose, and I'll admit it. And every fight he proves me wrong, knocking out Ross Pearson in the second round via TKO, 4:14 into the round. Beautiful punches. What do you think of that fight, man?
You know, I don't know why you hate the guy. I don't know why you hate him. He's a lot of fun to watch, really well-rounded, very active. He key eyes with every strike. Ha! Ha, 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 ha. And he goes in there with aggression, and his back-to-back fights against Roop and Pearson was like mirrors of each other. Really hard right hand puts the guy nearly out against the cage and then finishes them. And, I'm really happy for the guy to see him put together a win streak, probably the first time since 2008 or 2009. And I thought it was just a great fight. You pretty much summed it up perfectly with Pearson being the bulldog in the first round and Swanson coming back in exciting fashion to finish the fight.
Yeah. Mainly, I mean, I know it's not something I should be doing, but the main reason I keep hating on Cub Swanson is when I think Cub Swanson, you know what the first thing that pops in my head is, and I'm sure you can, yeah.
Let me answer. When he got matrixed by Jose Aldo in August of 2009, double flying knee KO.
That was so incredible. I mean, I probably sent that GIF to about 200 friends over the last couple years. When I'm talking to friends about MMA and how unpredictable the sport can be, I turn on that because the fight starts and Jose rushes him, and the fight's over.
And how about that mean cut and the grimace on his face when Cubs falls down after it hits? You just see him go, ah!
Oh my God!
Over.
And both of those cuts, I mean, he had a giant cut under and over his eyeball. That was, oh my God, that was.
Oh, that
ugly.
was a double cut. I forgot about that.
Yeah, I don't know if because he landed both of the knees. He landed a flying left and right knee. Both of them landed. I don't know if both of them caused the cut or if that initial just knee pounded out both of them. But yeah, that was, I mean, for cuts that aren't necessarily that giant and gaping, sort of a goat vagina type cut, that was one of the more nasty ones I've seen.
I can tell you that it was both knees because if you watch, he leaps in with the right knee, catches him on the top, which caused the big one, and then when he followed up with the left, that caught him underneath, almost probably inside the eyeball, and caused the second one on the bottom. And, you know, Kenny Florian has Ginsu knives for elbows. I guess Jose Aldo has a katana for knees.
I was literally just about to say katana swords for knees. That's hilarious. That is why we make a great podcast together, my friend. But yeah, that was really, really amazing with Swanson just rushing in there, sets up a couple rights, and just crushes Pearson with that left hook, who falls back into the cage, not knowing where he is. And Yves Levine rushed in to halt it at 4:14. The next fight, we had Brian Ebersol versus TJ Waldberger. You gotta love Ebersol, if anything, just for the giant arrow of chest hair pointing toward his face. That thing's amazing. The arrow. Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
No, you first, sir.
Yeah, I was just gonna break it down. The first round, Waldberger actually won. I was pretty surprised because Ebersol was the favorite, you know, rattling off all these consecutive fights, and I think he will get a notable opponent next. Waldberger won the first round, but wasn't able to hang on. Ebersol getting on top, implementing ground and pound, taking the final two. Like most people saw it, Ebersol won the fight with a unanimous decision, 29-28 across the board.
Yeah, Brian Ebersol, we talked about it last week, episode 3, the MMA podcast. We talked about how Brian Ebersol has put together an impressive streak for being unheralded, a journeyman. He comes in, beats Lytle in a fight he shouldn't have won, completely destroys Hallman, beats Claude Patrick, and you know, in this fight with Waldberger impressed the hell out of me because he didn't just pull guard. He was throwing shots. He had some kicks. He had some nice jabs and a right hand. And it's kind of funny, in the Dana White video blog, they were filming Ebersol after the fight, and he sat down, and he's getting hard on himself. He's like, God, I don't know what it is. In training, I'm comfortable, I beat people up, and then I'm never comfortable in the octagon. And Waldberger walks in, and they congratulate each other and talk about how they'll meet again for the title down the road. And I was just laughing at that. But I think Ebersol, like you said, he needs a really stiff opponent. How about this? If McDonald gets past BJ Penn, we'll get Ebersol McDonald for for a fight that should have happened back at UFC 140 if Ebersol doesn't in fact drop down to lightweight like he's planning on doing. And
if Rory McDonald doesn't fail a drug test like BJ Penn's challenging to take, which we'll also get to later on. But yeah, I like that a lot. I was actually thinking a little bit lower down, maybe a Diego Sanchez caliber welterweight. I don't know if he necessarily is warranted that top top 7 or 8 fight, maybe against the top 15 guy. I know how I'm getting pretty specific here, but I don't think that Wahlberger really gave him the test that he's going to get in the welterweight division, and he did test him. He definitely won the first round, and I saw Ebersol squeaking out a 29-28 decision. So I don't know if I'm necessarily really ready to give Ebersol that much of a leap in opponent from Wahlberger to a Penn or McDonald quite yet.
Well, I agree, man, because he's had 2 stinkers back-to-back. I mean, this fight did have its moments, but his fight against Claude Patrick was absolute dog shit at UFC 140. That was a bad fight, and I think you're right. They need to really kind of pick the right opponent for him. The only reason I bring up McDonald is not only for the novelty that they were supposed to fight, but the fact that we haven't seen McDonald go up against a wrestler yet. He hasn't gone up against a wrestler. He's fought a striker. He's fought a jiu-jitsu guy. Like, he hasn't fought a guy he can't out-wrestle yet. That's why I think it makes for an intriguing fight.
Yep. And, guys, definitely make sure to remember to tweet at us. Our buddy Brandon at KO Power 15 definitely brings up a good point, saying, Ebersol definitely won that decision, but Ebersol is very gifted on the ground, and the way Wahlberger was able to fight him, it looks like guy can give pretty much anybody trouble on the ground.
That's a great point, my friend. He impresses every time he goes out there. I think he's one of those fighters that he'll take what his opponents give him. Like, Hallman basically gave the fight to him. I'm not saying Ebersol didn't deserve the win, but Hallman played into Ebersol's game, and I think he's absolutely a monster in any position, especially full guard. The guy fucking beat the shit out of Hallman in full guard, and I think KO Power is absolutely correct. Good assessment.
Yeah, definitely. These are two guys who are both underrated. I don't know about them both fighting for the title anytime in the future, but both guys who should get more credit than they do. And I'm excited to see who Ebersol will get next, because even though I'm not sure it'll be necessarily a top 5 guy, top 6 guy, it'll definitely be a guy we've heard of more than who he's gotten in his last few fights.
Yep.
The next fight, Sam Stout beating Spencer Fisher with a unanimous decision, 30-27 across the board, which I thought it was a little closer than that. I gave the first round and third round to Stout, even though the third round was very close, and I gave the second round to Spencer Fisher. I was pretty surprised to hear all 3 judges had it 30-27, and I was even more surprised to hear after the fight Dana White saying that he had the exact opposite. He had Spencer Fisher winning the fight 30-27.
Yeah, just to kind of go into a little diatribe here, I really need to work on my opinion of judging, because I'm more biased and like a logical look. I'm not too good at it, but I think from here on out, every fight I watch, I need to, judge every round, because I'm really not too sure, man. I don't pay enough attention. I look at the guys after the fight, and I look at the fight as a whole. So I couldn't tell you, who won that exactly. All I can say is that Spencer Fisher's striking was on point. He was working with Freddie Roach. I got some feedback in here, Mac.
Okay.
A little feedback. I think he had some excellent striking. He was hitting Sam Stout with hard shots, and Sam, for once used wrestling in a fight. It was a big-time surprise for me, and I think it was, without a doubt, the worst fight in their trilogy. I think it was a little underwhelming, but I had Sam Stout winning via takedowns and counter-striking for that fight.
Definitely. I think most people took Sam Stout. Definitely a trilogy. I was thinking about it. I mean, there have been quite a few trilogies in the UFC, but all of the trilogies have had some sort of title implication to them, whether it's recently seeing Maynard versus Edgar, or seeing Tito against Shamrock. Every trilogy I've seen and heard of has really had implications to a title belt. And this Stout Fisher trilogy, it's a great trilogy. They're two guys who are known for fighting against each other just because of the legendary fights they have had. But I don't know if there has been a less meaningful trilogy, and not just the UFC, but all of MMA.
I disagree. I think there's one more that is just as, meaningless, but that's just my personal opinion, and that's Ortiz-Griffin.
But, the first and second time, and maybe even the third, honestly, every single time the winner of that fight has been launched into the not necessarily a title fight, but discussion for contendership. After Tito beat Forrest the first time, I think he was put into a number one contendership fight. When Forrest beat Tito the second time, I'll have to look it up, but I think he got a really good fight after that.
Well, actually, Tito fought Forrest the first time, and then after that fought Shamrock for their second and third fights, and then got the fight with Liddell. And Griffin in his next fight, I think he got
Rich Franklin.
Franklin.
Yeah, I'm looking at it now.
Long layoff, dude. Long layoff.
Definitely a much. You think about it. There have been about 3 years between each of these fights. The first fight was in the middle of 2006. The next fight was November 2009, and this is going to be the middle of 2012. So basically 3 years in between fights. And to put this into perspective, in between the first and second Tito Ortiz fight, Forrest Griffin fought 7 times in 3 years.
And what a good run he had, man. Beat Shogun by a finish.
Beat Rampage, took the belt from him.
Yeah.
And this stretch of 3 years, instead of 7 times, he's fought twice.
Yeah, that's crazy. I think both of them are reaching the end of their careers, and I really hope they put on a show on the 7th.
Forrest is one of these guys who, he really looks demoralized. I hate to say it, but after losses to Rashad and to Anderson, guy, just never really seemed to have the fire, never took anything seriously. You'll see interviews of him at the weigh-ins and kind of with a half smile on his face. He's like, oh yeah, Shogun's going to kick my ass. And, talking about, whether he was joking or not, talking about being on Quaaludes for the Anderson fight and talking about the possibility of retirement. It's really sad to see a guy who is so exciting to kind of start to get demoralized a little bit by the sport.
Yeah, he's one of those guys that I just enjoy his interviews. He's very nonchalant and just hilarious, a great human being. And I think he really hit his stride when he took that title. That was the peak, and I think a very unathletic, guy with a lot of drive. He did really well for himself, but he's not that new generation of fighter. He's old school. He's got a lot of mileage, and I just really hope to see these guys put on a show.
Yeah. I almost wish that Tito and Forrest switched mentalities. No offense against Tito. I've always kind of just been a hater of him, literally because he only plays bad boy persona. But, Tito seems to have had a fire lit under his ass. He beat Ryan Bader, which back when I was doing MMA at work, the co-host and I totally agreed that there was no chance in hell Tito would win. And turns out, Tito won. And since then, he has been fighting like a bat out of hell. And unfortunately, Forrest hasn't really showed off this this mentality. Forrest really is one of those guys who, even before his Ultimate Fighter claim with Stephan Bonnar, before anybody knew about him, he was 9-2 rocking wins against some serious guys. I mean, his 2 losses were to Jeremy Horn and Dan Severn before he ever joined the UFC, and he had wins against guys like he beat Chael Sonnen via triangle choke.
Triangle.
He beat Travis Fulton, beat Jeff Monson, beat some of the who's who of MMA before.
How did he beat Monson?
He beat Monson via unanimous decision.
Okay.
A 4-round unanimous decision, which I don't understand, but it was in Georgia, and we do things differently in this region of the country, here in the Southeast.
Yeah. Backwaters. It's backwards.
We like to do things that don't make sense. Even number of rounds going to a decision, perfect. A better chance for a draw.
Yep, I dig it.
But, not to convalesce off the point too much of Stout versus Fisher and UFC trilogies, but, definitely wasn't necessarily the barn burner that we've seen out of these 2 guys before. And Spencer Fisher did announce his retirement afterwards, which a lot of people were expecting, and definitely, one of those retirements where you look at it, the guy seems to be completely there, and you're happy that he's gotten out of the sport before he's taken too much damage to his mind.
Did you hear that he isn't opposed to fighting in Strikeforce in their lightweight division?
I actually haven't heard that.
Yep. There was an interview he did. He said, I wouldn't be opposed to hopping over to Strikeforce and keep my career going, which, you know what? I haven't seen the guy get thoroughly dominated where he's knocked out or submitted. He has been TKO'd twice in the last 3 years and had wins sprinkled in between. So I see no reason for him not to continue. I've seen him knocked out cold maybe once against Hermes Franca. So I think he really just I think he can do it, man. If he wants to hop over to Strikeforce, why not? He put on a hell of a show.
I completely agree with that. I really think the only 2 guys in that Strikeforce lightweight division who would have a really, really good chance of beating him, where Spencer Fisher would almost have one of those slim to none type chances against them, are Gilbert Melendez and Josh Thompson, and both of those guys have been rumored as coming over to the UFC. Gilbert for the last few years, just because he's been so dominant over in Strikeforce, and Thompson literally because he hung in with Gilbert so well during their last championship fight. If both of those guys left Strikeforce, I would even say Spencer Fisher's a threat to that belt.
I don't know if I agree with that. Too early to say, but you're right. He's got the skills to do it.
A lot of young guys in that division, but what's important for Fisher is I haven't really necessarily seen. I mean, he's slowed down a little bit in the last few years, but I haven't seen those really hard signs of aging that I would look for against the young fighter.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I was saying, the guy has a hell of a career, a list of who's who that he's fought, and I would be on the bandwagon to see him fight Jorge Masvidal or KJ Noons in Strikeforce. I would love to see those fights.
Those would be great fights, and like I said, I wouldn't see Masvidal or Noons being too big of a favorite there, because Spencer has so much experience against the top guys in the UFC. That those Strikeforce guys, there aren't many of them who have necessarily amazing strength of schedules, so to speak. Most guys who have 10 years in the UFC are in the UFC.
Yep.
Anything else on the Stout Fisher fight?
I think we have pounded this fucking fight into the ground.
Chatterbox.
Yeah, we've done everything we can do.
Yeah, for sure. And in the main event, something I'm sure we're going to spend at least the next 10 minutes talking about, Clay Guida versus Gray Maynard. Thank God Maynard won that decision.
Yep, I was considering breaking it down technically, but I'm just going to say one thing and let you have your take on it. I don't want to give, Clay Guida the time of day after that fight. I don't want to talk about it. That was one of the worst fights I've ever seen. I think it's number 2 behind Jeff Monson versus Tim Sylvia at UFC 65. I don't want to talk about this fight. This fight wasn't a fight. It was the reason it was good is because Gray Maynard flipped off and chased down Clay Guida for 25 minutes. I want my refund. If I had bought that fight and it was the pay-per-view, I would have tweeted Dana White, give me my freaking refund back. That card as a whole wasn't that great, and then to top it off with that fight, I'm still pissed just talking about it now. That wasn't a fight. That was horrible. Gray should have won by unanimous decision. I have no idea how that was a split decision, and that's essentially all I'm going to say about it.
Yeah, I mean, luckily the UFC has a commission or a president in Dana White who is honest. And during the fight, it was hilarious seeing Dana White tweet, "Wow, the entire arena is booing. I'm booing with them." Saying how, yeah, this is horrible. Saying, what is Guida doing out there? I could see a judge scoring it to Guida, which is why I was so concerned about the result. I ended up giving the third round to Maynard, but I think Guida won those first 2 rounds. I think Maynard won the last 2 rounds, and I think really the round in contention regarding who won that fight is the third round. And literally, I only give it to Maynard because of Octagon control and because of that one series where literally Gray Maynard is sprinting across the ring at Guida. And it isn't like Guida was a long way away and backtracking. While Maynard was running after Guida, he's literally running after Guida's back. Guida's back is turned. He's running away from Gray Maynard. And, to want to employ that strategy, obviously he is fighting out of Jackson's, doing this. That's one thing. But what really angered me toward Guida was the video blog Dana White released. If you want to find it, we'll actually post it up later on the website tonight, or you can just search Dana White UFC 147 vlog, one word. And it's really cool. White often gives perspectives of what fighters' mentalities are after the fight as they're getting their gloves removed and their tape cut off and whatnot. Most guys usually very humble. It's a testament to the sport, seeing guys who have just gone in there throwing leather at each other, trying to destroy each other for 15, 25 minutes, hugging and talking about the strategy and what the other fighter did well. Great testament to the sport. But Clay Guida is an absolute punk. Maynard had every right in the world to take issue with what Guida was doing, flicking him off, yelling at him, literally screaming, "Let's fight, stop running, toward Guida during the fight. Miraglata didn't take a point away from Guida until the 5th round, which I think he should have done. Or he didn't take a point away, rather. He warned him during the 5th round, which I think the warning should have come in the 2nd round. I think a point should have been deducted in the 3rd and the 5th rounds. And, Maynard had all the right in the world to take issue with Clay Guida and be angry at him. And after the fight in the hallways, Guida comes at Maynard. Are you serious? The one guy who is trying to ruin this fight, fighting like an absolute pussy, wants to come up to Guida and talk shit to him, saying stuff like, "Oh, you pulled my hair. Oh, this and that." And Maynard, rather, is sitting there like, "What the hell are you talking about? Why are you coming at me with this bullshit?" And it, what right did Guida think he had starting shit with Maynard when he was the one who made that fight absolute shit?
Maynard was the bigger man. You're totally right. He went to fist bump Clay, and Clay was being super aggressive, and his corner was yelling at him. It was some of the most unprofessional garbage I've ever seen in my life.
Which actually was the opposite of what happened after the fight. Guida doing his stupid little jump around dance, which it's really funny. You and I were on Skype watching this fight. You weren't exactly the biggest fan of Guida going into it, but you asked me before, and I was like, dude, I love Guida. Guida's always hopping around. He's an animal, throwing punches. That exchange he had with Diego Sanchez was legendary. I love Guida. I don't feel any way similar than the way I felt before that. Guida just, really turning from one of the UFC darlings in a lot of UFC fans' minds. I mean, literally the entire crowd went from chants of Guida, Guida to Gray, Gray, Gray as the fight progressed, which was really incredible.
I want to expand on what you were saying earlier. You were talking about how the first 2 rounds are Guida, middle round is debatable, last 2 rounds are Gray, right? I don't have any idea what you're talking about because that fight was so bad that I was pulling my hair out during the fight. I was so emotional and angry, like, what is this garbage that I can't make that, like, really logical call on the fight? And you know what? Guida, there's always been a soft spot in my heart for that guy. He's had some real stinkers against, Anthony Pettis, but he's had some wars against Sanchez, Henderson, Griffin. He's had Roger Huerta. He's had a lot of wars, and I've been talking for a while about how that guy should drop down to featherweight, 145, and make some waves down there. And after that fight, I remember telling you on Skype, I don't care if that guy gets cut. I wouldn't care. I don't care. That guy is not a fighter. He comes out yelling weak in the backstage. He puts on this stupid little running performance. I'm done with the guy.
Guida's yelling weak after the fight. You know what was weak, Clay? Your fucking fight you just had. That was so weak. Calling out a decision in a fight where you were refusing to finish. I'm sorry, but Guida refused to even try and finish that fight. And he's yelling weak because he lost the split decision in which he ran away. And this is a very interesting stat from the fight that I almost wanted to rewatch the fight just to count and make sure it was correct. And I did rewatch it, and I didn't count, but I see why it's correct. And that entire fight, through 25 minutes, neither fighter landed 50 punches.
It's absolutely pathetic. I'm sure Dana White is beyond pissed.
They were averaging, on average, less than 2 punches landed a minute. How ridiculous is that?
The last thing I have to say about it is I think we can move on happy for one reason. If we get a fight where neither guy's engaged, that's a bad night. We have a fight where Maynard was putting it on the line, being, really just entertaining to the crowd and calling Clay out. We can blame Clay Guida. We can blame him. Like, that's his problem. And Dana knows it, Joe Silva knows it, and we know it. And we can move on from that fight with a healthy conscience. So that's the only thing coming out of this fight that I can think.
And in any other sport, luckily, if this was the NFL, NBA, MLB, NHL, what have you, the commissioner would be trying to back up the other fighter. Well, it was a strategy. He would basically say what the trainer Jackson said, oh, well, it's an interesting strategy, and I think it's very important, and fighters should be able to do it. Luckily, we have a UFC president who knows that was a shitty fight and said so. Our buddy KO Power 15, Brandon, saying, what are our thoughts on that compared to Condit Diaz and Starnes Quarry? And I put him in the middle of those. I think Diaz Condit wasn't necessarily as bad. Condit obviously threw and landed a lot more strikes, landed a lot more significant strikes. I actually rewatched that, and although I do think Diaz won 3 of those rounds, I saw a lot of moments that I didn't remember of Condit landing some impressive strikes. But, he would back away and jump in for a split-second strike and back away. The only thing I really give Condit a lot of credit for is his ability to not get backed up against the cage, which is Nick Diaz's MO. He loves to make a guy have the cage against his back, and that's when he just starts letting loose. He inflicts so much damage, whether it's his fight against Shamrock, Scott Smith, Paul Daly, even BJ Penn. That's his MO, and Condit refused to let him do it. And it wasn't, and I don't think it was as bad as Starnes Quarry, but I mean, still, what is that even saying? Starnes Quarry, Caleb Starnes, should have been immediately cut for that fight. And
let me just give a shout out to KO Power for some excellent talking points via Twitter. Shout out to you, buddy.
KO Power 15, follow him right now if you haven't yet.
Yeah, honestly, the Starnes Quarry fight was really a mirror for this fight, except this time we had to sit through it for 25 minutes as opposed to 15. The Diaz-Condit fight, I actually watched 3 or 4 times to really get an idea of who won which rounds by what, and it still had its exciting moments. I mean, there were a lot of good exchanges. Diaz was talking shit, and Condit had some amazing striking. I mean, spinning back elbows, leg kick to high kick, just some really amazing stuff. I will never, ever watch Maynard Guida again. I'm not going to do it. I refuse, and I think that's the difference between those fights.
Definitely, and talking about the Condit-Diaz match, it's kind of funny. I had Diaz winning that fight by 1 round, just like I actually had Michael Bisping defeating Chael Sonnen by a round, and those were the 2 fights which were to set up the 2 most anticipated interdivisional fights in the UFC now, which are the rematch between Chael Sonnen and Anderson Silva, and that fight between George St. Pierre and Nick Diaz, which is funny how I think Diaz should have won that fight against Condit and gotten a spot against GSP, and I don't think Sonnen necessarily should have gotten that nod against Bisping to get a fight against Silva, even though I think that should have been a 5-round fight. And in those circumstances, Sonnen was roaring back. I had Bisping winning the first 2, Sonnen winning the third. But, pretty interesting how both of those fights went the opposite of the way I expected, with Sonnen and Condit actually being judged the winners, which, honestly, I would rather see Sonnen Silva 2 instead of GSP Diaz, so I can't really complain about it. But, it just goes back to the adage, which Dana White said 1,000,000 times, we've said a few times, I'm sure we'll say it 1,000,000 times as we continue to pump out episodes, but you can't let it go to the judges, and more you're seeing guys who are just seemingly, I don't need to finish this, I'll let it ride, in a fight that could go either way. I mean, Guida knew in the 5th round that the fight was not necessarily his. You were saying you didn't see how I had the fight so close, but in those first 2 rounds, even Maynard said that he was confused. He didn't know what Guida was necessarily doing, and he wasn't chasing Guida. Guida was doing the same strategy that Johnson did against Ian McCall, where he would leap in, pop, leap out. We have Ian McCall on in that, and we're actually going to ask him to juxtapose that recent fight against Johnson to these recent Guida Maynard fights, Condit Diaz fights. I don't necessarily think Johnson did it as bad as Condit or Guida, but I still think he employed that strategy where he spent most of the fight trying to get away from the other fighter rather than trying to set up a strike or engage, which I have no problem if 2 fighters aren't just punching each other in the face the whole fight, like Forrest versus Bonner, but you can't be running away. You've got to be trying to figure out what sort of strike is going to be thrown next. And, like, say, Anderson Silva, he isn't necessarily going at a guy Wanderlei Silva style trying to destroy him, but he's still standing in there trying to pick apart what the other guy is doing. He isn't just running away from him, and I can't stand that new strategy being employed by a lot of fighters. I think if the referees, like, Guida was warned in the 5th round, if we can get more of those warnings, more of those points being taken away from fighters, then I think we can manage it a lot better.
I agree, man.
It's done now.
Let's get the yellow card and the red card system into play. I got one more talking point before we move on, and that's you were talking about how you had Bisping over Sonnen in their match, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. I got one thing to say about Michael Bisping. I've actually grown to like him a little bit. I don't actually really like him, but I'm starting to. But the one thing I can say about
not a very crowded bandwagon.
The one thing I can say about that guy is that if he would have won that fight and fought Anderson Silva, it would have been like the scene from Jurassic Park where the T-Rex is tearing up that goat. There's no way Bisping has the skills to hang with Anderson Silva, and that expands onto my next point. He will never, ever fight for a UFC title. He couldn't hack it at 205. He dropped down, looked impressive against Cairns, and has dropped every single major fight he's had there. That guy will never, ever fight for a title.
I don't know if I agree with you necessarily. I mean, even though he lost that fight to Sonnen, he looked like a bat out of hell. And if he fights like that against everybody, honestly, I don't see anybody sans Sonnen and Silva beating that Michael Bisping who fought Sonnen recently. He had great striking, great takedown defense. I even see him beating the likes of a Brian Stan or a Hector Lombard.
Nope, he could beat Lombard. He will not beat Stan. He will not beat Munoz. There's no way. He
and it's
lost
funny how
to fucking Wanderlei Silva in Wandy's 185 debut.
There's
no way he's gonna win a title, dude.
I refer to that fight as an enigma on multiple occasions. I don't know how Wandy pulled off that fight, and it's funny because you like Bisping and I don't like Bisping, yet you're saying he'll never fight for a title and I'm saying he will. But I definitely see a future for the Brit, and that actually really parlays into our next topic really well. We were talking about guys who don't necessarily see the need to finish a fight or anything that crazy, and we saw a lot of that at UFC 147. UFC 147 was this past Saturday, and Belo Horizonte, Brazil. Michael kept referring to it as Belo Horizonte, Brazil, which I guess is the way the locals refer to it. It's not the way that we refer to it as Westerners. It's Belo Horizonte. Great fights. A ton of people there. That video, fans going for what seemed a mile, just looping around the stadium for blocks, waiting to get in. And that place was packed for the prelims, which you never see. Lots of decisions, though, and like I was saying, Dana White wasn't necessarily happy. Out of all of, I guess, there were 10 fights, only 4 were finishes, 11 fights rather. 4 were finishes, 7 went to decisions, not necessarily what the UFC brass wanted, and what White said specifically was a lot of these guys seemed like they already had a UFC contract, and they were, seemed more interested on dancing around and trying to gain fans than they were trying to fight for a UFC contract. Dana White wasn't necessarily thrilled with the performances these guys put out.
Yeah, I can't blame him. As a fan, a fanatic, I am there for every single UFC, Strikeforce, Bellator, you name it. I'm pretty much there to watch it. And this was one of those cards where I think they fell short because the guys that went to decision, I'm all for a fucking fight going to a decision. Most people say they hate it, they want to see a finish. If it's back and forth and they're exchanging and there's scrambles, they're hitting the cage, there's submission attempts, I don't care if it goes 15 or 5. I want to see a good fight, and they didn't do that at this last UFC. The pay-per-view, 147, it was very underwhelming, and I really, really wish that these guys would fight more. I don't know what it is. 2 nights back-to-back, man. It's aggravating, and anyone who actually spent money on this pay-per-view, I'm sure, is pretty fucking pissed.
Yeah, I've hit on this point a million times probably, but it's kind of ridiculous how the UFC charges $60 for every pay-per-view, and I'll try not to go into a giant rant on it. we touch on things like judging and TRT, and definitely in the future, we plan on having roundtables, especially during off weeks where there aren't really many cards to talk about, unlike this week where we have a shit ton of cards to talk about, where we really can get in deep and break down things like TRT, things like judging, things like this new phenomenon with fighters not wanting to engage, seemingly. And also, I was just talking about these $60 pay-per-views. If you were to buy every pay-per-view the UFC put out in 2011, it would have cost you $1,020. Even if you're making a good salary of $50K, that's 2% of your entire income. That's ridiculous. I think you would have a lot more buyers if it was $19.99, $9.99 maybe. And luckily I live in Gainesville, a lot of bars, and I have friends who don't come out to with me. But it's really something that I don't understand, how the UFC can justify a fan spending $60 now, almost 2 out of every 3 weekends. But this
of course.
Yeah, I mean, unless you're pulling down 6 figures, paying $1,000 for UFC cards is not at all reasonable. And this is one of those cards. I mean, it seems like Dana White argues with, he always argues with fans, but it seems like recently one of his biggest arguments has been against fans who are saying, "Oh, I want a refund, give me my $60 back." And this is one of those cards that it is reasonable to want a refund for what you bought, because it was a lot of people just feeling each other out, and not in the good way. Just a lot of decisions, a lot of obvious decisions. Even though I do want to say Franklin versus Wandy was a great fight. God, Wandy was so close in the second round to finishing off Rich Franklin, which we'll talk about in a second. Before we get into the main card, I guess like we normally do, we'll go from the bottom of the card up. Let's start with Verdum versus Russo. This went the way most people thought it would. Verdum's one of the top heavyweights, was in the discussion when Overeem got pulled from the Dos Santos fight as a replacement for a title contender. Russo's a good heavyweight. Iron Chin just doesn't really have the tools it takes to match up against one of the world's top heavyweights in Verdum.
Yeah, it's a yin to the yang of heavyweights. You got a guy who, excuse me, he's inspirational to people everywhere. He works full-time for the Chicago Police Department. He has a newborn kid and a wife, and he also fights in a cage for our amusement. What a guy. And then you have Fabricio Verdum, a guy who came from jiu-jitsu from Brazil and didn't really train in mixed martial arts for most of his career until recently when he hooked up with Rafael Cordero in, I think it's San Diego, somewhere out there. And, there's something about Verdum that has always gotten on my nerves until I think 2 or 3 fights ago, where I finally started to see he's just a cool guy. He laughs. He has a lot of fun. He loves training, and I was kind of rooting for him in this fight. I was rooting for both of them, to be honest, and what a performance he put on. He comes off that dominating win against Big Country and then transitions to this and finishes a guy who is 4-0 in the UFC, 1 finish, 3 decisions. Like you said, a really solid B-level heavyweight, and just puts it on him in front of his hometown crowd. I want to see Fabricio in a number 1 contender fight against Overeem.
Definitely. That I think would be a lot better than the fight we saw in Strikeforce. Overeem wanted to engage. I mean, like I was talking about before, and Verdum literally laid on his back, but he almost made it more entertaining than it was annoying, just because of those faces he made at Overeem while he laid on his back. It was like, come on down, come on, guy. That was pretty comical.
That was incredible, and what a shitbag of a fight. I thought that was going to be a barn burner. Either Overeem is tapping or Verdum is going to sleep, and at the end of the night, I wanted my money back, and I didn't even pay anything for that fight.
Definitely. And but like I said, I think a second fight would be much more interesting because of his increased ability standing up. And against Mike Russo, we saw that in spades. I mean, he dismantled Russo, who has been able to stand with guys who are known for hard punches. I mean, Duffy blasted him for 3 rounds, and Russo roared back, but Verdum just put it to him and took the fight in the first round. Only 2 minutes and 28 seconds in. It didn't even go half of its scheduled length. And Verdum wins via TKO.
Yep, incredible victory. You could tell he was just elated after that fight, and what a show he put on using zero jiu-jitsu, by the way.
Absolutely none. We also had both of the Ultimate Fighter finale fights. Actually, we're gonna have Ian Uncle Creepy McCall in about 5 or 10 minutes. So we might only be able to get to one before the interview. We'll definitely continue on after the interview. But let's talk about the Honey Jason versus Pepe Oliveira fight. Was one of those where, it definitely went back and forth. But I think if there was any fight that Dana White was talking about specifically as far as people not really going at each other, was this one, and Jason took it 29-28.
Sorry about that. I had to press a button.
I was about to say, have we lost Chris? Oh, no.
No, I'm still here. Yeah, that was a stinker, let's be honest. Not a fun fight. I think Hani winning was justified, but other than that, I don't have much else to say in the breakdown.
Definitely, which gives us enough time to talk about the other fight, Cesar Mutante Ferreira versus Serginho Moraes. Serginho was a replacement for Daniel Serafin, and it's looking like the winner, Mutante, who was one of the scheduled finalists, will fight Serafin for what will be the real Ultimate Fighter middleweight finale.
There's a funny story behind that too, right? You remember that?
Actually, I'll let you fill our listeners in, because you actually were the one who originally told me about that, and you probably know more about it than I.
Well, basically what happened was I was expecting to see Daniel Serafin. He's about 5'9", 5'10". He's really pale, covered in tats. And then I see, this really dark guy stepping into the octagon. I was like, wait a second, what is going on here? And I was like, dude, Serafin's supposed to be fighting, and it's Serginho. And you're like, what? Really? and then we looked into it. We did a quick little Google search. Check him out at Google. And we looked at it, and we're like, oh, yeah, he's a replacement. What a fucking world, man. You can just look at a guy. You're such a fanatic that you can just call it out as you see it.
Definitely, yeah. It's hard, it's hard when you don't really know the guys that well. I didn't watch the Ultimate Fighter Brazil too in depth. Always kept tabs with it, but didn't really watch it too in depth. And when you were like, yeah, I think there was a replacement, I was like, oh well, I don't know. It looks like a couple Brazilian guys.
I see 2 Brazilians fighting. That's all I know.
Yeah, I'm trying to skirt the border with being racist and not being racist here. But yeah, it's hard to really get to know the fighters when they don't speak your language. I can't read. I don't know how to read those symbols at the bottom of the Ultimate Fighter Brazil, and they don't have a translated version where I can just pop it onto English.
Yeah, it was funny. We were watching the Ultimate Fighter Brazil, and the first time we watched an episode, we were kind of exchanging, is it going to be dubbed or is it going to be subtitled? And then they started playing it in Braille.
Yeah. Yeah, that would definitely be interesting. I don't know what exactly to say about a fight in Braille.
Moving on.
We are planning on talking about Rich Franklin versus Wanderlei Silva, but I guess let us get Ian Uncle Creepy McCall in here real quick. Let me dial him up on this.
Let's get into the meat of it.
Let's get into the meat. 949.
Don't give that out.
Huh? Oh, yeah. Yeah, I started and I was like, oh. All right. And let's see if we can get Uncle Creepy on. Should be bringing in a second here. Very high tech here.
Hello.
Hey, Ian, how's it going? It's Jake from the MMA Podcast. Thank you so much for coming on, man.
No problem. How you guys doing?
We're really good, really good. Yeah, I wanted to ask you first, you're known for being a really hard worker, but luckily we're catching you in an off-season moment. What have you been doing between fights to relax and decompress and whatnot?
I've been moving. I just moved out of my apartment and got a condo. And just been hanging out with my family, my daughter and my wife, and trying to relax. And, but I'm training a little bit. I'm always training. I did take 2 weeks off, which was a little long for me, but I'm in the gym, doing a little bit of work, just trying to not feel sorry for myself and doing it, and just get back to the daily grind.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, it would be foolish to feel sorry. You had two amazing fights. The first fight against Johnson, I really think most people think you won, and this second fight, it was really close, and Johnson kind of employed one of those strategies a lot of people have been talking about recently, the running and gunning strategy Guida and Condit have used recently. What do you think about the way Johnson fought, almost not wanting to engage with you as much as you wanted to, or as much as either of you wanted to in the first fight?
It's a game plan. You gotta do what you gotta do to win. And he runs, but he still engages. It's not like he runs enough where it's annoying. He still engages and does his job, so you can't really get mad at him. He's just being smart, because he knows if he gets in a firefight with someone like myself, I'll end up knocking him out. So no, I think it was fine. And he won the second fight fair and square. The first fight, sure, whatever happened, but he definitely won that second fight. So
definitely,
yeah, man, dude, Ian, it's a pleasure to be talking to you. This is Chris.
Yeah, when I told Chris a few days ago that we were having you on the podcast, I think he had a minor heart attack.
I love me some Uncle Creepy, man. I'm always on the UG, seeing you posting up some cool stuff. What is it, UGCTT? Something like that?
That's it.
That's it. And what does that stand for? I still haven't gotten an answer.
It stands for the Underground Creepy Pop Team.
Bam! There it is, man. Dude, I've been thinking about it lately. You have this big story, where you have this crazy past, and you became this awesome fighter. Can you just tell us a little bit about that transition? I know this is kind of a prominent story, but I just want to hear kind of some true insight to it, without all fluff.
You know what? I rode Mr. Toad's Wild Ride for a while. I had a I'm not gonna lie, I had a great time. I had a lot of fun. In doing the fun, I screwed my life up pretty bad, and just realized that there's better things out there than partying and being a jagoff. And I'm living that. I had enough faith in myself to stop doing what I was doing and just get my life together, and I wanted something more. And I mean, by now I've gotten it. I've got got the whole shebang. I got a family, a wife, a daughter, and a good career with an awesome company that supports me and pays me well.
Yeah, man. I was watching your last, what was it, Tachi Fighting Palace fight? What, I can't remember exactly what it was. I was watching that last one, and I was like, man, I would love to see this guy in the UFC. And here we are, dude. You're fighting for the UFC. It's an amazing story, man. And cool little transition here. I have a kind of a strange question for you. Who would win in a tickling match, Mighty Mouse or John Fitch?
I think John Fitch. John Fitch is the lay and pray master, so he would lay and pray and tickle him to death.
Oh, that's amazing, man.
Yeah, you probably have the most interesting name in the UFC in Uncle Creepy. I've read a couple places where that came up from, but did you want to tell our listeners where the nickname Uncle Creepy popped up from?
Yeah, I've never been a fan of nicknames ever. I think nicknames are stupid, especially if you give yourself a nickname, you're a douchebag, and I probably don't like you very much. But I was just hanging out with my friend. His son calls me Uncle Ian, and then one night we were playing with a skateboard. It was late, like 3 a.m. I was trying to get him tired for bed, and he just said, Uncle Creepy skateboard, and everyone heard it and it stuck, because everyone knows I'm not a nickname guy. So of course when they get the chance to give me one, that's ridiculous. It'll stick.
Yeah, it's a really cool. You really give a lot of people insight to your lives, and it was pretty funny. I was listening to another interview with you that you were talking about saying your wife actually made you move out during training camp because you become another person, and I was just a little curious what that person was like, and where does he live when he trains for fights?
I live with my trainer Corey Beasley. It's even. I only live like 4 miles from my gym, but he lives about a mile, so it's just closer. And I'm just, especially with the last fight, I was just annoyed with the whole situation and angry at myself and angry at just the entire situation in general. So I was being an asshole, and she called me on it and said, because we had talked about having me move out in the first place. For my next training camps, just because I'm an intense guy, so if
definitely,
I don't know, I wasn't being ready.
We were annoyed too, man. I was annoyed at that fucking decision. That really fucking grinded my gears, man. Like, how does some dumb idiot even give that a close decision to McCall? I had you winning that pretty freaking soundly, and then you don't get the overtime round. Like, that was ridiculous.
Yeah, that definitely sucks.
Yeah.
But you keep going.
No, I was just going to agree. It was a double dose of bullshit. I mean, first they say Johnson wins, and you're like, what? No. And then you hear, oh no, it was actually a draw, and we should have had a extra sudden death round that McCall obviously would have won, because in the third round you were literally bashing Johnson's face and only stopped to give one of your famed war cries before you continued to bash on his face.
That was amazing, man. What a great moment in the UFC.
Yeah, I try to put a stamp on it and do something different.
That's why we love you, and that's why we co-sign your threads.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, the second fight didn't really play out similarly to the first. One of our listeners, KO Power 15, just tweeted at us wondering what you think Mighty Mouse did different in the second fight that may have given him the edge this time around.
He stayed a little more elusive, and one thing that sticks in my head is he kept blocking out my left arm, from elbowing him, from underhooking him, from doing a lot of things. My own fault completely. I ended up cutting 18.8 pounds the 24 hours before that weigh-in. So I cut too much weight. I didn't have my diet dialed in. And, it's no one else's fault but my own. I was living on my own. I wasn't living at home. I should have had this stuff in order, and I didn't. So I definitely faded in the third round. And it's trying to, if you watch it, I haven't watched it, but apparently it's pretty apparent. You watch it, you see me fade.
You're a big flyweight, man. Like, looking at you next to DJ, I was just thinking, how the hell is DJ going to contend with that, man? And obviously it's just agility. The dude was hopping around the cage. Joe Rogan once said famously, I think Demetrius might be the fastest guy in MMA.
Yeah, and I think he definitely could. He definitely could be or is. I'm pretty sure he is. And, it's just I was, I was in the best shape of my life. I really was. And everyone else says that, but I definitely was. I went from training camp to training camp. I just cut too much weight, and I rehydrated too much. I did 3 bags of IV instead of 2. If you look at it, like I said, I haven't lost the fight. My coaches were saying that I was bloated and I felt bloated, and just a bunch of stuff. I could go on. I don't want to use excuses because he won fair and square, but I just didn't do what I should have.
Well, you put on a hell of a performance in the first fight. I was standing up during that, and you definitely held your own in the second. And most people, like I feel that I come in contact with, is that you deserve a number 1 contender fight to take on the winner of DJ and Benavidez. Is that what you want in your next fight, or do you want to kind of work your way up? I mean, I know there's 2 paths, but you're not the kind of guy that wants to sit around and wait. So I assume you want that guy.
Yeah, I want to get to work, but I know that what's fair and square is the fact that I lost, and someone like John Dodson, people keep calling for me to fight John, and that was the first person I asked for, was to fight Dodson. But, he's coming off a pretty big win, and I'm not, they don't like pairing people up with other people who have lost. A win and a win always fights, and a loss always fights. So I'm sure I'll have to win at least 2 to get a title shot, if not 3. And I'm fine with that. I don't mind. I'll fight twice before the end of the year if they let me.
Yeah, the UFC has always tended to do that, and I do normally agree with it, but I don't know necessarily in this opinion because you're pretty much the consensus number 3 in flyweight behind Joe and Demetrius, and I think a lot of people think that it makes complete sense for you to be back in a number 1 contendership fight because it wasn't like DJ beat you handily in the second fight, or even beat you period in the first fight. So I think Dodson would make a lot of sense because people generally think he is the next one down there. But other than Dodson, who else at 125 interests you?
Gaudino does. He looked a lot better than I ever give him credit for. I was not impressed with him at all. He was at 35. But at 25, he looked good. That would be a fun fight. Or Lineker lost. I'd like to fight Lineker. Anybody that they have right now. Yama's supposed to be a good fight. Or I don't even know who else is going to drop. But, whoever. Right now, I just want to fight. I want to fight as soon as possible.
Yeah, definitely. And one last question we have for you, which is definitely a very pressing issue, something I really wanted to ask before we let you go. How do you get your mustache to curl like that?
Just proper grooming and wax.
Oh, I've tried to grow out a killer mustache so many times, and all I can get is just a massive upper lip, bush. I usually grow out a beard, and all I want is that awesome twirl, be able to rub the twirl from time to time. All I want is an Uncle Creepy mustache, and I'm having a hard time making it happen. Maybe you can come out with a tutorial on the underground on what products to get, proper grooming techniques, because honestly, that's all I want in life, an Uncle Creepy mustache.
I will. You know what? Make a thread about it. We can figure something out. I'll start my grooming techniques online or on YouTube or something.
Oh, that'll be amazing. I
dig it.
I will holler at you on Twitter with the link, and we will make Uncle Creepy's grooming techniques. We'll make it happen.
Dude, I thought it was product. I really thought that Ian McCall had some kind of product he was keeping from us.
Oh no, it's all natural.
Well, I mean, it is product, but it's about grooming, and then you got to get a good wax to make it hard.
I know all about making it hard, sir.
I bet you do.
Yo, Ian, I mean, honestly, thank you so much. We are kind of in our infancy. This is our 4th episode, and we are so honored to get you on and talk shop with you. Definitely follow him. He is at Uncle Creepy MMA. You have any shout-outs or anything you want to tell the world before we let you go?
Yeah, UGCTT, my fans, my friends, my team, Team Oyama, Lotus Club Jiu-Jitsu. I love you guys. Thanks for all the support and all the attention I'm getting.
Awesome. Ian, thank you very much. Like my partner said, it's been an honor, and just the fact that I'm talking to you is mind-boggling, dude. I wish you luck, and I'll be standing up for your next fight.
All right, man. I'll make you guys proud next time.
Thanks, man. Take it easy.
Later, dude.
And that was Ian Uncle Creepy McCall. What an awesome interview. It seems now almost an impossibility for us to
don't jinx it.
To get a douche fighter on.
Don't.
No. I mean, I will go ahead and say it. We are 6 interviews deep, and I feel like in every dude we've talked to has been friendly, open with us, and if we do get a guy on who wants to argue with us, which I really highly doubt, I don't think there's going to be any jinxing in play. But what an awesome interview!
This happening 100 episodes in, we get Chael Sonnen on, and you say, Chael, what's the deal with triangles? And he goes, well, the deal with triangles, Jake, is that it's math. And that's all I got.
Chris, screw you. I don't like you. Oh, no. I don't think we'd ever level down to that douchey of a question. I always try and keep everything we ask him respectable. I wouldn't have Sonnen on and ask him, what's your favorite instrument in the band? A triangle? I don't think I'd ever be that guy, but
I would definitely ask him what his favorite ice cream flavor is, for sure.
I bet it would be triangle.
I would have to say it's chocolate mint.
Brazilian macadamia nut? I don't know if that's a real nut or a real ice cream. I don't know.
It could be. It
feels
really
like the macadamia nut would thrive in the jungles of Brazil.
Well, macadamia nut is an ice cream flavor, so you add the Brazilian, and boom.
That's very true. You a Brazilian. Oh,
we're not going to do that impression. We're going to move on to news.
We're not going to do that. We're going to do this. We're going to actually talk about Rich Franklin versus Wanderlei Silva. We weren't able to get to that before we had Uncle Creepy on, and God, what a fight. That was maybe the closest I've ever seen a fight get to a TKO before Franklin was saved by the bell. Multiple occasions the ref almost jumped in. Give Franklin a lot of credit. I do agree with the referee's decision not to stop the fight, but I think if the fight was, the round was maybe 5 minutes and 2 seconds long, I think Wanderlei would have gotten the finish. I mean, he leapt on him, and just like Franklin himself admitted before the fight, he would have to stay out of the path of the quote-unquote tornado that Wanderlei Silva is. Silva came at him with haymakers, dropped him, was on him. Franklin did an amazing job at keeping himself alive, but Wandy was putting some damage on him there at the end of the second.
Yep, couldn't have said it better myself. Vondy came out, vintage Vondy, but he was a smarter fighter. He was using leg kicks, body kicks, high kicks, jabs, right hands. He looked very composed in there. And Franklin, like Joe Rogan commented on, was hopping around, with more movement than we've ever seen from him. He was just left, right, back, in, out. Like, he was just everywhere. And it made for a very compelling fight. And when Wandy dropped Franklin, I thought he was done because he looked dead. He fell backwards stiff, and then I'm pretty sure he woke up on the way down. And from there, it kind of went into cruise control. I say if you're going to watch the fight, watch the first 3 rounds, skip the 4th, and skip ahead to the last minute of the last round. The last 2 rounds, the championship rounds, were pretty bad, but it's reasonable considering the fact that 25 minutes is a long way to go in a fight.
Real long way to go. I think most people agree that Franklin won rounds 1, 3, 4, and 5. I was very surprised that none of the judges gave Wandy a 10-8 second round. Every judge had it 49-46 going, like I said, Rich, Wandy, then the last 3 going to Rich. And it actually was a pretty funny video that came out before the fight. I don't want to digress too much from the actual fight, but we pretty much went over it. I mean, Rich really in the first, 3rd, 4th, and 5th rounds never let himself get rocked and didn't necessarily come close to finishing Vanderlei, but definitely had impressive stand-up, controlled the octagon, and was the only non-Brazilian to win a card at UFC 147, which wasn't too incredible when you take into account that there were only 2 non-Brazilians fighting on the entire card. And Russo, who, not to discredit him too much because I like him a lot, but everyone pretty much expected him to lose that one. And Franklin, doing what he always does. It's kind of weird because he definitely takes a long time off between fights, hasn't been fighting that often recently, but yet he's still the guy who will take a fight on 1 or 2 weeks' notice. And when the opposing coach to Vanderlei, Vitor, dropped out of this, he backed out of his fight against Kung Lee at 148 to take on Vanderlei.
He looked so good in there, man. I mean, Franklin looked like he just looked more mobile, active, and way better than I've seen him in the past. In the past, he looks very plodding, like he's very labored in his movement. And in this fight, he looked like a welterweight. It was fucking amazing. Like, I was really awestruck by it. And overall, it was a decent fight. And I think Franklin takes it by aggression, control, and effective striking for sure. Wandy rocked him in the second round, but I think ultimately Franklin had the fight.
Definitely. And everyone pretty much knew it when it was over. Most people saw Franklin winning a decision, but he put on an impressive enough show to not get cut from the UFC, like a lot of people were saying. That was something that was in contention a little bit. Which is luckily not going to happen. We'll see more fights with Vanderlei. Dana White actually came out saying that he wasn't going to be cut from the UFC anytime soon, which is good to see. But the point I was actually going to make before I broke it down, it was a very funny video. Also, another video we'll post up on the MMApodcast.com. Usually when I refer to videos, I also have a notepad here, and I'll jot it down. And within an hour or two of when we post up the podcast, when this finishes, I'll make links so people can go on that. And again, thank you so much to everyone who's followed us on iTunes, visits the websites. Numbers are spiking. It's hard almost to keep up with bandwidth numbers. I'm having to pay more and more, but it's definitely worth it knowing that people are enjoying the podcast and enjoying what we're doing. But it was a hilarious video. I guess it was a day or 2 before the actual fight, and normally we see a lot of tension between fight camps. There actually were a couple intense stare-downs between Franklin and Vanderlei himself, but it's a video of Vanderlei's whole fight team on an elevator, and a UFC staffer gets on, and they're joking around with him, saying, "Oh, we're gonna mess up his hair," because he's wearing a suit. He has his hair done nice, and it's all of Vanderlei's fight team. Vanderlei, Cordero, Verdum's there, a couple other guys, and the doors open, and you see Rich Franklin, the guy Vanderlei's fighting in 2 days, and his eyes get big.
Slow motion, they pause in on his face.
They pause it, and his eyes get really big, really quick, and he's like, "Whoa!" And I guess he makes the decision. Well, you can't pussy out. I can't just be like, "Yeah, I'll get on the next elevator." So he kind of coyly gets on, his head down, but the team, starts going like, "Oh no, we shouldn't let him on. We shouldn't let him on." Oh, I guess Vanderlei says we should let him on. Then he gets on, and in what could have been a really kind of tense moment if these guys weren't mature as they actually were, they start going, "Let's crush him, let's crush him," and everybody's laughing. Franklin's laughing, Vandy's laughing, his whole fight team's laughing, and they all start to get in a real tight circle around him and push in on him. It was a really, really good moment, which makes you realize, man, this is a dope-ass sport.
Yeah, that was fun, for sure. I enjoyed the hell out of it.
Yeah, but that really kind of covers everything I had on Franklin Wandy. Unless you had anything to add, we got about a half an hour left in the podcast. We got a lot of news to go over, a couple segments still.
Now let's move on.
Let's end that, and let's go into my 10 seconds of sports. Are you ready, Chris?
I've always been ready.
All right, I got to get a deep breath for this, because I kind of have to go on a 10-second rant. Let's go. LeBron wins first ring of 8 against Thunder in 5 games. Spain defeat Portugal in PKs in the semifinals of the Euro tournament. Move on to face winner of Germany, Italy tomorrow at 2:30 on ESPN. Arizona wins the NCAA baseball title against 2 non-defending champions.
Oh, God, it's over.
Ectoplasm everywhere.
Oh, it's so...
Oh, God. And that also transitions into the news. All right, yeah, there actually was a lot of news coming out in the sport of MMA this week. We'll start with the most recent and possibly the most interesting. Rashad Evans considering a move down a middleweight, which is really funny if you think about he originally got into the UFC with a season of The Ultimate Fighter heavyweights. He won the heavyweight season of The Ultimate Fighter, and he's thinking about moving down to 185. What a testament for a really amazing fighter. And I think everybody knows the reason why he's thinking about this decision, and that reason is Jon Jones.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he knows that Jon is better than him. I mean, he can actually make a fight out of it, but beating Jon Jones, forget about it. So I've been saying it for years, man, probably 2 years. Rashad should move down to middleweight. He is not a big light heavyweight. He's pretty short. He's 5'11". Most of his muscle is in his legs. I think if he lost a good, 30 pounds of muscle, he would be quicker, more agile. He'd probably carry over a more, explosive wrestling and probably better striking. So I think that's a great move.
Definitely. And it's such a great move that people have been calling him out to do it for the last couple months. It's something that was almost expected. A lot of people, it's funny, over on the MMAplayground.com, definitely check them out. They have a great forum section. I'm also on there. I'm at Jake Walters, JakeWalters, which is coincidentally enough my name. Chris is on there at Jesus Tapped. For crazy religious hate mail, it's the MMA Podcast at gmail.com. But yeah, we were talking about on the forums over at the Playground about the 5 reasons why Rashad is moving to middleweight. I forget exactly who authored that, but they really went into detail on each of the 5 reasons about why he shouldn't switch over. And my 5 reasons of why Rashad Evans should move to middleweight: 1, John Jones; 2, John Jones; 3, John Jones; 4, John Jones; and 5, Lyoto Machida. I think a Lyoto Rashad rematch would be pretty intriguing, but when it comes down to it, John Jones is dominating that division, and almost like you saw an exodus from the welterweight division when GSP took over, and even more so an exodus from the 145 division when Jose Aldo took over, including guys like Faber and Florian. You're going to start to see an exodus of guys leaving the 205 division simply because John Jones is so dominant there. Chris?
Yeah, I totally missed that last part. You kind of didn't. It was kind of fuzzy. What was that? Sorry.
No, I was just talking about Rashad moving to middleweight and comparing this to when you had guys at 145 switch divisions when Jose Aldo took over. You had guys at 170 switch divisions because GSP took over. And,
right.
And I think you're going to start to see a lot of 205ers either move up or move down simply because John Jones is so dominant.
So true, man. That guy, not only is he a pariah, the fucking guy comes from a wrestling background. He's got A+ striking, crushing submissions. He's got the longest reach in the division. He's huge. He's tactical. He's got Greg Jackson, Mike Winklejohn in his corner, and a plethora of training partners at Greg Jackson's MMA. The guy isn't going anywhere. He may end up surpassing the greats of our sport in the next 2 years, and I think Rashad moving down to middleweight is long overdue, and I think he would have some amazing wins down there considering the fact of how well he's done at light heavyweight.
Yeah, and you use a very interesting word, pariah, and it's something in sports that I've noticed, and it's very interesting. About, maybe 15 years ago, you look at the greatest players in sport. You look at the Michael Jordan, Wayne Gretzky, Mark McGuire, Sammy Sosa. They were all universally loved. Everybody loved Jordan. Gretzky, everybody still loves. Sosa and McGuire eventually were muddled into steroid talk, but at the top of their game, they were loved, and the best players in every sport were universally loved by sports fans. And now it's very interesting. I don't know what has happened, but you look at the best guys. Back a few years ago when A-Rod was the name in baseball, everybody hated him. Right now, LeBron James, everybody hates him. Right now, you look at MMA, John Jones is simply a pariah because, he does speak from his high horse, and even I will criticize him from time to time about it. But I like John Jones as a fighter, and I don't really understand where all this hate, necessarily comes from. You saw an explosion on message boards, whether it was the UG, the playground, the gutter that is Sherdog. You saw people just digging into John Jones, and I'm probably going to immediately regret calling Sherdog a gutter because I do.
It is a gutter. It's a poop gutter.
And it sucks because I will go on Sherdog, and there are people on there who make really interesting points. Sherdog, when I first got into the sport, was where I went. I was active on the Sherdog forum, and it sucks to call Sherdog a gutter because there are a lot of quality posters on there, and I don't want to talk about those posters. I actually have the MMA podcast on the Sherdog forums, and I had talked about in our initial episode the issue with Winslow, and a lot of people were making very, very valid points, very interesting points on that. But for every one of those, there were 5 people going, "Dang, Kim Winslow! She's a bitch. She's a C-word." I guess I can say cunt.
Yeah, you can say cunt. It's cunt radio.
She's cunt. all sorts of stuff. Yeah, we don't have a boss to answer to. We don't have the FCC to answer to. I guess I could say cunt all I want, huh?
Let me put it this way, dude.
We should rename this to the Cunt Podcast. Yeah, the Cunt Podcast.
The UG is bad. Overall, it's bad. There's a lot of good nuggets that make up for it, and that's why I keep on going. Sure Dog, I haven't been on there in 3 years because it's the worst. It's a toilet.
I only think the UG is bad. I think the UG has a much better ratio of good posters, and obviously has a bunch of posters like UGCTT, Uncle Creepy, or UC whatever.
The only thing that keeps me coming back is the fact that actual fighters post there. Rogan's on there. I love it. Like, I'm never going to leave the UG. But guess what? The Sure Dog doesn't have that because nobody goes on there anymore because it's just it's a flood of jizz and cunt.
Yeah, and very, very well put. The only thing I don't really like about the UG is how every other, like, literally, I want to say 2 out of every 3 posts on a good thread will be TTT, subbed for goodness, TTT.
5 pages later, you're wondering why you're
all right,
on there.
There has got to be a better way to do this, which actually the Playground, MMA Playground, which I genuinely think, I mean, honestly, I don't have a formal thing written up with MMA Mental. I don't have a formal contract written up with the MMA Playground. The only reason I tell you to listen to the MMA Mental podcast and go to the MMAPlayground.com is because I love those sites. And the MMAPlayground.com is truly an awesome forum, and I won't harp on it too much.
The Playground is amazing, dude. I haven't been on in a while. I apologize, guys. I'll be back on. But when I went in there, I introduced myself, and the title of my introduction was Stale Milk. And the whole point of that was to say, look, I've been, the forums of MMA are becoming stale, and that's why I came here. And I got 40 replies?
Something.
Within an hour, like 40 people were like, "Hey, welcome, bud."
Yeah, and not a single one was like literally the only caution I would have in pumping this up is like, oh man, I hope I don't make it too popular and it gets overrun with douches. Because literally in like an hour or 2, you had like 30 or 40 replies, and none of them were cunt. It was all, oh, welcome to the Playground. If you have any questions, ask me. I'm a moderator here. I had actually told a couple people that you would be coming on, and a couple of people who are familiar with me, like the infamous K-Pro, would say things like, oh, I hear that Jig Walters is no good. He's not a good guy.
Dude, it was amazing, too, because if I would have posted that on the UG, I would have gotten, like, 80% of the replies would have been, go back to the OG.
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely hard to find an intelligent, friendly MMA forum that's active, and the Playground's that. I know if I post up something about the UFC, I can leave it, come back in an hour, and there will be easily 7 or 8 replies, if not 20 or 30.
Thank you, Playground. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Playground. We love you. We also love the MMA Mental and our British friends across the pond. But, yeah, I think we've beaten Rashad moving down to death. Other UFC news, BJ Penn, actually, also, this is a story that came out today, challenging Rory McDonald to a drug test, which I don't know if BJ's really genuine in what he said. What he said is that a third party, I forget the exact name of him, but he said a third party has agreed to come in and for free test both guys randomly for the fight, and it's something that wasn't really expected. BJ's never done this before, obviously, and even probably the most interesting of all, Rory McDonald has never been suspected of taking PEDs, so it makes you wonder if BJ is actually being genuine here, saying, oh yeah, we're doing this for the benefit of the sport, let's start having companies do this, or if he thinks Rory McDonald's juicing some way or another.
BJ just has something against TriStar. He fought George back at UFC 58 for a #1 contender fight. Lost that by a close decision. He put a savage beating on GSP. I love the guy, but, you know, he really put it to GSP. GSP went to the hospital. BJ went to a bar. That says it all. And then he rematches with GSP, and GSP puts the brakes on a fucking beatdown, dude. Straight up went in there, beat BJ like his, like BJ talked shit to his mom, and then he had to fight Kenny Florian at lightweight for a title, and that guy was training at TriStar at the time. So it's definitely kind of a feud that he's got going on with TriStar, and ultimately I think this couldn't hurt the sport. If two fighters are volunteering for Olympic-level drug testing, I'm all for it. I would love to see that. Maybe we could weed out some of the cheaters.
Definitely, and it's something that really needs to be addressed, because when you see guys fail these T to E ratio tests, there's nothing you really can pay them, because all that's off is their ratio. They aren't testing positive for anything. Were they probably taking something before? Yeah, but is it provable? No. So it's, something when fighters were randomly drug tested before this UFC 146 press conference, I was thrilled. We got to have more of these random drug tests to make sure fighters are in line. When people like Alistair Overeem come out, I've arranged my own random drug test. Yeah, I'm sure this is totally random, and you arranged your own drug test. You're not going to fail a drug test you arranged for yourself. Come on, guy.
Dude, when I saw that, I laughed. I
really,
laughed. Like I love Alistair Overeem. He's my favorite fighter, bar none, regardless of all the commotion going on. I still love that guy. But when I saw that, I was like, okay, so you're going to try and tell everybody that you're going to take your own drug test?
Right?
Come on, dude.
That is absolutely ridiculous.
Oh, man.
I would have loved if he would have failed it anyway. He would have set up his own drug test, been fucking prepared for it a month in advance. Oh yeah, I'm gonna arrange a public drug test in 1 month. Still fails it. Comes out, oh shit! I knew I was forgetting something. I thought it was the trash, but it was the gigantic amounts of Anavar that I was pumping into my body.
He's sitting in the doctor's office in a undersized seat. It's a seat for children. He's squeezed in.
No, it's actually a seat for adults, but it just looks like a seat for children.
So he's looking at the doctor and he's like, I could do a pretty mean over him. Here we go. And how did the test go? I'm really looking forward to the test. Mr. Overeem, you actually failed for, and I quote, Anabol, dextrose, sugar, steroids, horse meat, Ambien,
PCP. I didn't know horse meat was on the banned substances list. That's horrible for Overeem.
I train hard, and I like to... He always smacks his lips.
If you think the Overeem's good, just wait until Chris breaks out the GSP impression, which is it's not just the best GSP impression I've ever heard, but it's one of the best impressions I've ever heard, bar none.
Thank you for coddling my feathers. I'll do it at some point.
I will coddle your feathers sometime, but not this podcast, because we have to give people a reason to tune into the next one, and what better reason than a good GSP impression?
I appreciate what Jake Walters is saying to me, but at this point in my career, I have fought Dan Hardy, Thiago Alves, Jake Shield. I'm not going to do the impression.
Jake Shield. Amazing. Oh my god. I wish we didn't have a shitload more news and only 15 more minutes to go, or else I would probably egg you on to do that impression for the next half hour. Also in UFC news, actually really cool, Joe Rogan, Goldberg's color commentator. A lot of people don't know about his fighting background. People think Joe Rogan, Fear Factor dude. He was a national champion Taekwondo guy, back in his early 20s, late teens. He has a black belt in Taekwondo, had a brown belt in Jiu-Jitsu for the longest time under Jean-Jacques Machado, switched over to train with Eddie Bravo over at 10th Planet Jiu-Jitsu, which once again, thank you to Eddie Bravo for letting us use his song for our intro. It's Jiu-Jitsu, aptly named by the group Smoke Serpent, which Eddie Bravo's in. Last night, Eddie Bravo presented Joe Rogan with his black belt in Jiu-Jitsu. So hats off to Joe. Definitely, it's awesome knowing Goldberg's one of the best play-by-play guys in the game. He really brings the excitement. Wow, he really brings the excitement from, when he's saying, inside the octagon. I think I just probably popped some speakers. Or
dude, I love that commercial for Budweiser with Anderson, where Anderson walks into a bar and looks over, and the piano player's Bruce Buffer, and he just whispers, "It's time.
It's time." Yeah, it's really amazing. Probably the top two dangs in the UFC are "It's Time" and Goldie's famous "It is all over." And definitely awesome knowing just as a fan that the color guy Rogan isn't just a stand-up comic, isn't just a former announcer with Fear Factor, but dude's a black belt both in Taekwondo, a stand-up art, and in Jiu-Jitsu, which if I want to have an announcer be a black belt in it's Jiu-Jitsu, because it is a real pleasure when watching UFC fights, hearing Rogan say shit like, all right, well, he's caught in an arm bar, he's got to roll over, he's got to put his right leg over the back. He knows exactly what is happening, and he gives you a lot of insight into what exactly is going on with the fight.
If only we could be so lucky as to have all the judges in MMA as prominent, knowledgeable, and entertaining as fucking Joe Rogan is. He seriously, if one day he can't do commentating anymore, get that guy in a judging position. He'll be the fucking best judge in MMA, and I'm really, really, really proud of him. I mean, I know that sounds douchey, but good job, Joe. You fucking did it, man. You're a black belt in 2 martial arts, and you got a lot of fans here.
Yeah, being a black belt in 2 martial arts is incredibly rare, and cited, with his comedy, with his podcast. Both Chris and I are big fans of the podcast. Don't nut hug too bad, but Rogan really, really one of the top guys in the sport. I think he won a World Mixed Martial Arts Award for MMA Personality of the Year and Mixed Martial Arts. Really, really cool story that he finally got his black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Was at the brown belt for a while, and now he's moving up. And I hope really to see Rogan stay in the sport and do what he does. Moving on, ONE FC actually had 2 huge signings this week. And Shinya Aoki and Bibiano Fernandez.
Yeah, man. I mean, what a drop of the ball by the UFC. Straight up, I know these guys aren't world beaters, but I would love to see those guys in the UFC. Bibiano at 135, Shinya at 155. I think both of them are just amazing fighters. I've been watching them for years. How did that happen? They were just, money grubbing. They were asking for too much money.
Yeah. To be an elite fighter and sign with ONE FC above the UFC doesn't make any sense. People judge you on your legacy and the strength of fighters you fought. And Bibiano and Aoki aren't going to be fighting each other. It's something that I definitely question. Maybe ONE FC can pay Bibiano or Aoki more for one fight, their opening fight, than the UFC necessarily would. But over a course of 5 fights, I don't see it plausible that ONE FC is going to be paying either of these guys more than the UFC is, just because the UFC is so much more popular. But at the same time, we can criticize this all we want to Aoki and Fernandez, think that they won't be able to hold up. I mean, Aoki got dismantled by Gilbert Melendez, so I don't know how he would necessarily fare against some of these big wrestlers at his division. Bibiano really hasn't tested out those waters yet, but like I've heard people, I mentioned K-Pro earlier. He mentioned that he thinks in a couple of years the top 3 MMA organizations in the world are going to be UFC, then Bellator, then ONE FC, and I'm starting to see that shape up with Bellator signing big guys like Paul Daly, like Brett Rogers, who just fought on last weekend's card and got a victory, and ONE FC is doing the same exact thing.
ONE FC is so goddamn exciting with their pride rules.
Yeah.
But one thing I just want to bring up before we go on to that pride rules thing is you guys have left out Strikeforce. Is it kind of a sign that it's going to be folded into the UFC?
I think eventually Strikeforce is just going to be totally dissolved, like we saw with the NFL and AFL. The one metaphor I really see apt to UFC taking on Strikeforce is the NFL taking on the AFL, and eventually they just dissolve the AFL, and instead of fighting them against each other for the Super Bowl, they all just became the NFL, which I don't mind the UFC having competition, but I want them to be markedly worse than the UFC, and I know it seems like a monopoly, and in some ways of thinking it is. But the last thing I want, we've talked about it a few times. I'm sure we'll talk about it more as we talk about more and more episodes. I don't want to see it turn into like it is in boxing, when even boxing aficionados can't rattle off all the major champions in boxing, not only because the weight classes themselves have become so diluted. You have 20 belts in one organization, but you have 5 different organizations, and none of them are necessarily the best. You have the WEBA, WBC, IBC, WBO, all these different organizations. I know. And, oh my gosh, it's hard to talk about and not just naturally snowball into a rant. But, like our buddy K.O. Power just tweeted at us, it's nice to see some of the smaller organizations pick up legit talent that's not really suited for Zuffa. I don't know if Zuffa's necessarily going to give Paul Daly the amount of fights. And in Bellator, he's going to be able to fight. In Bellator, he'll be able to fight a lot more. It's definitely a win some, lose some argument. There are pros and cons to it. And just as long as Bellator, ONE FC, I love seeing them stage great fights, but I don't want to see them, rise up and try and challenge the UFC like a Strikeforce did, like we saw Affliction do, things like that.
Oh, Affliction. We'll remember you.
Never forget. R.I.P. Affliction. Really quick, we'll talk about that. Talking about diluting MMA. There's been brief talk about Carano and Rousey being pegged against each other for a super fight. I don't know how I feel about that. I definitely want to see the UFC bring on divisions eventually, but I don't know if a super fight is ever necessarily good for the sport, and I don't think it'd be good for the women's divisions.
Now, before I respond to that, who is Karani?
Karani, Gino Karani. Have you never heard of her?
Rousey versus Carano.
Exactly. You got me, buddy.
Yeah, you pretty much nailed it. I mean, if they put on one fight, then where do they go from there? Like, the UFC is well known for being long-term. They want to have long-term goals. Dana White is very well known for saying, we're going to go and we're going to defeat the China market in 10 years. We're going to take Brazil. So what good does it do the UFC or women's MMA if they just one super fight and then it fizzles out from there? Like, what if it fails to deliver? So I think you're right, man. I think ultimately the best business sense and the best thing for the fighters is to not do it until they have a well-developed women's MMA league.
Yeah, definitely. Rousey still hasn't defended her belt once, and really, I mean, if they do make a Rousey-Carano super fight, come on, that is going to hurt women's MMA more than anything else, making it about sex appeal and all that, which really would be the only reason it would happen. Strategy-wise, it would make more sense to have a Cyborg Rousey type super fight, and the only reason you would see Rousey fight the likes of Gina Carano is just that sex appeal.
I'm kind of offended, Jake, to be honest, that in all the lead up to the Tate Rousey fight was those two chicks staring at each other across from a theater, and they're both in dresses.
And they're getting closer and closer.
That doesn't help the fucking fight game, man. You need to have these chicks show their highlights of beating each other up. I mean, I know that's not what a lot of people want to see on TV, but that's the only way you're going to sell a good fight, because if you dress them up like girls and then you expect them to perform on pay-per-view, that's not going to happen.
Very much so. I was talking to a female friend of mine who's an MMA fan, and she said it looked like they were trying to make it look like Tate and Rousey were about to make out.
Yeah, man, exactly, dude. That doesn't get me pumped up for a fight. That gets me horny, dude. What are we doing?
What are we doing here? You're sending Chris massive mixed messages, and trust me, you don't want him fully torqued. We have about 5 minutes left. You ready for the beatdown of the month, Chris?
Does a bear shit in a china shop?
It does. The end of every month, we're going to bring you a segment, beatdown of the month, who we think had the beatdown of the month. My beatdown of the month actually came at 1FC, and it involves a guy we've heard of before, Raja Huerta, fought, I believe, a guy named Morales. I'm not pronunciation guy. Couldn't even pronounce pronunciation. Wow. So, leave it up to Chris to say this guy's name, but just look up Huerta's soccer kick. Holy shit. It was one of those strikes. The guy who delivered it, Morales, said in an interview after the fight, I didn't want to throw it. I did not want to throw that soccer kick. And you can see why, because, I mean, literally, Huerta's on all fours, just struggling, just got punched in the face 100 times, and Morales soccer kicks him back to America. That was gross.
Yeah, that's definitely the boot on the tip of a ass-kicking Sunday, man, for sure. Like, he just took a huge beat, kept on ticking, got kicked in the face, and that was it. I mean, a lot of people think that's brutal, but I don't think it's any worse than somebody taking a flush head kick on the feet. No difference. The only difference is whiplash. But my beatdown for sure was Fedor versus Hizzo. It was good to see a so-called legend get a really good victory. He retired after the fight and said that this would be it for him. He hung up his gloves. That's a pretty big call, and that was my beatdown of the month.
Definitely. And Fedor Emelianenko, whatever his first name is, Morales, those are our two beatdowns of the month. So I don't really have any more news topics we talked about. Once again, thank you for listening, everybody. But, Chris, what did you learn today?
I learned that Ian McCall is a great guest, man. I enjoyed talking to the guy.
Definitely. I learned that Ian McCall uses wax to keep it hard.
You gotta be kidding me.
And
so true.
And like we've said before, thank you so much for tuning in. It means so much to us that our listeners give us the support that we do. Log on to themmapodcast.com to get news, updates on the podcast. We got tabs up top. Check out any of our episodes. We got YouTube links. An iTunes link, Facebook, Twitter. Check yourself before you wreck yourself. Big dicks in your ass is bad for your health. Chris?
And Jake, we gone.
We gone. Take it easy, y'all. TheMMAPodcast.com.
Like this, so tomorrow.